From the Glenn Gould studio in Toronto, Ontario, this is the 2017 Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by Porsche. Ladies and gentlemen, your master of ceremonies, Norris McDonald.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to, believe it or not, the 24th induction gala of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. I'm delighted, as I am each year, to act as your master of ceremonies, and delighted also in saying that this evening is being brought to you in part by Porsche Cars Canada Limited and is being live streamed on fanschoice.tv. We in the Canadian motorsport community have much to celebrate these days. A young Canadian driver in Formula One who's scoring points. A couple of young Canadian stock car racers who are making waves south of the border. Maybe not 100% young, but DJ Kennington's doing a pretty good job down in Talladega, Alabama this weekend. And if the rumors are to be believed, an all-Canadian driver lineup is in the cards to be on the grid for a team in the Verizon IndyCar Series next year. We're gathered here tonight to witness the induction into the Hall of Fame of 10 worthy individuals who each in his own way has made an outstanding contribution to motorsport in this country. Now I have a bit of a surprise. A great Canadian racer who has frequently attended this gala but wasn't able to be with us tonight, has sent us his best.
Hey guys, it's James Hinchcliffe here, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the 2017 induction ceremony for the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame. Congratulations to all entering the hall and being honored tonight. I hope you have a great evening. Take care.
Yeah. I've got it written here, thank you, James, but I'm not sure he'd hear me, you know. As has been the case in previous years, we have a silent auction out in the lobby. It will go until 10 o'clock. I have to remind you that as well as being an induction ceremony, this is also a fundraiser. So I would urge each and every one of you to take a look at the auction and to bid high and bid often. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming the chairman of the board of directors of the Hall of Fame, Dr. Hugh Scully.
Thank you, Norris, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great privilege and honor to be the chair of the board of the Motorsport Hall of Fame. We have a board that works very hard, puts together a lot of work and a lot of detail, and I certainly couldn't do what I do without their support. An evening like this, of course, has many people who contribute and make a tremendous effort. It just doesn't happen effortlessly. Norris has already acknowledged the sponsorship of Porsche. We have from PRN the souvenir program. Joel Robinson is the producer of what we're looking at. Tim Miller has worked on the script. Eric Thomas, the voiceover. Nice combination. Michael Taylor, Rob Turner have collaborated and worked together very hard to put together the silent auction. And as Norris has said, we'd like you to visit and bid often. Ralph Lucio provides a great deal of help with this and will be assisting the inductees as they come up onto the stage. And we've got Bill DeVitko and Mike Powell, who are ushers and provide a lot of other assistance. I'd like to thank also the Glenn Gould Theatre staff and management. They've been very cooperative, and it's a real pleasure to work with them. The person who is really one of the superstars in putting this together is our manager and coordinator, the intrepid Sid Priddle. We owe a huge debt to Sid for what he's put together. Peter Lockhart has worked very vigorously with Sid. And I note that Betty, along with Cherie Cook, who is responsible for the seating arrangements, and Cherie has had great patience and forbearance as she puts this together. And ladies and gentlemen, of course, we have our articulate, informative, and talented Master of Ceremonies, Norris McDonald. Back to you, Norris.
Thank you, Dr. Scully. You know, it was nice that Hugh took the task of thanking everyone who contributed to this evening away from me, because, of course, last year I forgot to thank anybody and heard about it when I got backstage afterwards, so we made sure it didn't happen again. Now, I want to personally congratulate all of tonight's inductees. The Hall doesn't just let anyone in. This is a Hall of Fame, and the people so recognized have made a lasting contribution to our sport, both nationally and internationally, and in some cases both. Some of the honorable members of the Hall of Fame who have been inducted previously are with us here tonight. If you gentlemen could stand when I call out your names. Bill Brack, 3-time Canadian driving champion. Paul Cook, who really runs racing in Canada. Don't tell him, though. Ron Fellows, he and his partner Carlo Fidani rescued Canada's most storied road racing circuit, and we owe so much to them. Scott Goodyear, where is Scott? Ralph Lucio, standing over in the corner, waiting to step in if needed. Roger Pert, who's the president of FIASN Canada. Dr. Hugh Scully, who deserves another round of applause. One of the leaders, if not the leader, of motorsport medicine, not only in Canada, but the world. Brian Stewart, my good friend Brian, is the king of Indy Lights. I asked Brian a couple of years ago, he hired one driver and the fellow drove for him for 2 years, and then he fired him and hired another guy, and I said, "What'd you fire him for?" And he said, "He heard all my stories." Oh yeah, and me. So, members of the Hall of Fame, ladies and gentlemen. Last year, the Hall of Fame introduced the Rising Star Award. The first recipient was Lance Stroll, who's done pretty well in his first year with Williams. It is our pleasure this year to recognize a young man making waves in another arena, stock car racing. The Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame's Rising Star Award for 2017 goes to Caden Lapsevich.
He's been called the Canadian stock car racing phenom, the youngest national champion in Canadian racing history. As he was finishing high school, this Grimsby, Ontario native claimed the 2016 NASCAR Pinty Series Canadian Stock Car Racing Championship at the age of only 16 years, 10 months, and 16 days. Our inductee was the first driver to win a NASCAR Pinty Series championship and named the Jostens Rookie of the Year in the same season, and all with a car and team lacking any kind of major sponsorship. He followed up his championship success by being selected to the prestigious NASCAR Next program for 2017-18, designed to help young drivers develop professional skills to grow their marketability in NASCAR. Our inductee has won 6 NASCAR races, including 3 this season, and multiple top 5 finishes in close to 30 NASCAR Pinty Series starts since 2015. He joined the series full-time in 2016, racing on a shoestring budget, often not knowing if he had the funds to get to the next race. But thanks to support from his legendary Lapsevich racing family, plus loyal friends, this young man has been able to reset Canadian stock car racing history using inherited, raw talent. Please welcome the 2017 Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame's rising star, Caden Lapcevich.
Good stuff. Now, I hope this is on. Yes, it is. You started car racing when you were just a little kid. Yeah. You're a big kid now, but you were just a little kid. Quarter midget racing. Tell us a little bit about how quarter racing prepared you for your career today.
It helps you with a little bit of everything, developing patience, developing that, that just sort of driving ability that you need to sort of progress through the ranks. You learn about working with your family, trying to, work with other kids at the time that you were racing with. So quarter midget racing taught me a lot. It was a lot of fun. I like traveling through the States, going race to race and, seeing my friends and, winning some races along the way was fun too.
Well, and you've won more than your share, and that brings up my next question. You and your younger brother have set some records in quarter midget racing that some people think will never be surpassed. Are they right, or do you think somebody's going to catch you someday?
You know what they say, everything's got its time, and it's not a record, I guess, but I think me and my brother set the bar pretty high when we were racing quarter midgets. We were we always felt like we were the ones to beat when we went there. We always felt like we could win on any given weekend, no matter what track we were at and what class we were racing. So we just wanted to have fun with it. We loved racing, and to be able to pursue it sort of as a career is, it's been a lot of fun.
Well, terrific. Last question. We'll let you sit down. Last year, you did win the national championship, the youngest in Canadian racing history. It was amazing. You have been selected this year for the NASCAR Next program, as Eric mentioned in the voiceover. Tell us very quickly, what's that about?
The NASCAR Next program is just, it's sort of NASCAR giving you their NASCAR nod, I guess you could say. They sort of see you as an upcoming driver, and to be selected for that was huge. It's helped me a lot with sort of how I present myself, how I can do interviews and try and present speeches, but also, as you guys probably saw in the video, we lack a little bit of sponsorship, so it's helped me sort of try and, like I said, present myself better and try and building relationships and all that stuff. So it sort of prepares you for every aspect that you're gonna come up against in racing. So it's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we can get back on it next year and learn some more.
Well, that's great. Here's a little something from the Hall of Fame to help you with your tuition very quickly. You've started university in Ohio.
Yep.
The name of the place, and you're studying?
I'm going to the University of Northwestern Ohio for high performance motorsports.
Well, good luck in your career and all the best. Thanks. Caden finished third this year in the NASCAR Pinty's Series, and he has taken on a university degree course as well as to continue his racing career. We wish him all the best. Now, I had an email exchange this week with Tony Spiteri, who's the Vice President of Marketing for Pinty's Delicious Foods, which sponsors the NASCAR Series here in Canada, and is involved with some NASCAR races in the United States as well, specifically at Bristol. He's in Europe and was unable to attend, but I'd like us all to give a round of applause, please, to Suzanne Reimer, who's here representing Pinty's and Tony tonight. Thank you, Suzanne, and everybody at Pinty's for doing what you do for Canadian motorsport. We're going to start the inductee process here at this time. There's a bit of a change here. So our first inductee are Doctors Jacques Bouchard and Ronald Denis.
Safety in auto racing is of paramount importance. The preparations for safety and the delivery of health care has made tremendous strides, and our inductees have continuously been at the forefront. FIA, the Global International Automobile Federation rules concerning the rescue and medical services on the track and to the hospital if necessary, are aimed at providing the best possible immediate care in the shortest time possible. Practicing as a plastic surgeon who was involved with the first FIA Canadian Grand Prix in 1978, Dr. Jacques Bouchard has been the Chief Medical Officer for that event since 1979. He's also been a member of the FIA Medical Commission for 20 years and a founding member of the International Council of Motorsport Sciences. A prominent surgeon who's also worked the Grand Prix since 1978, Dr. Ronald Denis became trauma chief and chief surgeon at Hôpital du Sacré-Cœur, the receiving hospital for the Formula One Canadian Grand Prix. He has also been the medical director for the Molson Indy and the Mondial Players. Their work and devotion has been instrumental in influencing the field of rescue and medical care in motorsport, not only at the Canadian Grand Prix, but throughout the world, helping to ensure the safest possible environment for our sport. Many innovations launched in Canada have become standard for the sport around the world. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Dr. Jacques Bouchard and Dr. Ronald Denis.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Merci d'être là pour nous et pour les autres. Merci au Hall of Fame pour nous avoir acceptés cette année. C'est un grand honneur. Let me go back to the first time I went to a Formula One race. It was in 1968, Mont-Tremblant. Young student, go up there with my sister and a friend. And at that time, the cars would park in the infield. So my sister and her girlfriend got in the trunk of the car, naturally. Got there, everything went very well, and then they asked us to open up the trunk. We tried to act as surprised as we could. The car was like this, obviously. Didn't work, had a great race. Second time to an F1 race was the 1978 Grand Prix at Watkins Glen, which was being held 1 week before the first Grand Prix in Montreal. I went there and walked the course and heard over the PA system, the announcer mentioned that of all the drivers that had driven the US Grand Prix 10 years previously in 1968, 10 of them were now dead. This has changed tremendously in the last 40 years. From many viewpoints. First of all, the passive viewpoint of safety by the way the cars are now built and by the way the tracks are now maintained and installed. But also from the active viewpoint of safety, which means rescue people, medical teams are better trained, lots of more equipment is now being used around racetracks, and this has helped all of us do a better job. And the track record of serious injuries in racing has gone down tremendously over the last years. And we've got, of course, Sid Watkins to thank for that a lot. He's been there for a long time, as well as you, Scully, obviously. I'd like to thank here my mentors who helped me understand racing a lot from the safety point of view, and namely that's Paul Cook and our old friend Barb Armstrong, who were there for a long time for us. Naturally, this is an evening where I'd like to thank my wife Joanne, my son and my daughter who are here, and their companions, and also my two sisters. And I'll just have a few words to introduce my very best friend, Dr. Denis, whom I've enjoyed, whose presence I've enjoyed over the years on a monthly basis around the racetrack and around the world, actually. We've traveled a lot together. He's been mentioned as chief of surgery at Sacré-Cœur Hospital, which is the receiving hospital, and he's a damn good fellow. Ronald?
Merci, Jacques. It was and it is a privilege to work with you. As you well know, beside time, the most important thing in trauma is teamwork, and you did build a hell of a team. Thank you, Paul, and a special thanks in heaven to Bob Armstrong, and thank you very much for the honor. Just a few words on what was our contribution as a team to motorsport. I would like to say that we brought trauma expertise by bringing a level 1 trauma center to the hospital track. We brought what we like to say the right doctor for the right patient by bringing at the track emergency physician, trauma surgeon, neurosurgeon, orthopedic surgeon, and anesthesiologist. Finally, we brought something that caused a few headaches to some, so we brought video conference technology to the track, so we were in constant visual communication with the receiving hospital. Finally, but not the least, it's a special moment to share this honor with the people I love. Justin and Claudia, my 2 daughters, Sylvie, my partner and the woman I love, and my good friends, as a matter of fact, they are more like family, Chantal and Fernand. So, merci beaucoup and thank you for the honor.
I was just thinking, as Dr. Denis was talking about trying to sneak people into Le Circuit back in 1968, if the number of people were counted up who had snuck into speedways and racetracks, none of them would be closing. In cockpits of race cars with tarpaulins on them. Everything has been tried at one time or another. Our next inductee is Terry Dale.
Usually, race car drivers get all the attention, but without the organization and behind-the-scenes work, the cars would never make it to the racetrack. Through the efforts and devotion to the sport from our next inductee, racing in several series has flourished. After joining the CASC-ASN Canada in the early 1960s, our inductee competed in rallies, slaloms, and ice races, along with road racing at a national level until the early 1990s in a variety of cars like a Mini Cooper S, a Mazda RZ-7, and a Chevrolet Corvette. In addition to his chief stewardship for the well-known Players GM Series, the Firestone Firehawk Series, and Michelin Enduro Series, he expanded his role internationally in the late 90s as chief steward for KART's Indy Lights Championship, the SCCA's Trans Am Series, and more recently as race director for the IMSA-sanctioned Formula BMW USA and Porsche GT3 Cup Series. But it hasn't been just paperwork and logistics. Our inductee was also the pace car driver for Rolex Grand Am Racing. He's also been involved with kart racing and served as team manager for a Porsche FIA GT2 effort for runs at Daytona, Sebring, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and Le Mans. Today, while continuing his Ottawa-based automotive business, he continues in the sport at a prominent level as chief steward with the Trans Am Series and the very popular Nissan Micra Cup. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Terry Dale.
Thank you. A wonderful honor, and I truly, deeply appreciate it. It's for doing something that I've spent my whole life doing, and it's been a part of my life. The short version is that I joined my first CASC affiliated club with a good friend of mine, Terry France. In 1963, TSOA, MCO, until earlier this year when I founded and am currently the president of ASN Canada's latest affiliated club, the Ottawa Sports Car Club. So I'm a lifer, like many in the room. The mutant gene has been passed on. Our oldest son was a regional racer, ASN Canada official. Our youngest son worked 1 year for Powell Motorsport and 5 years with Emcee until he got a sensible, real job and is flying a hot air balloon. So what can you do? Kids are kids. The best part for me is, in all the years that I've been involved in all the various aspects of what I've been doing, is the friendships, and they last forever, and they're very meaningful. And seeing a whole lot of them here again tonight is special. When I first was invited to become a race steward, and I was racing at the time, and my wife looked at me with eyes like that and said, "But you hate officials." Well, that's in a way true, but more accurately, I hate officious officials. And I made a promise back then that if I was going to be working as a race official, I would never become one of those. So hopefully that's what I've been able to accomplish in a small way. Finally, again, with friendships, somebody that's known me all my life and has been a special friend and shared many adventures, worked as a race official in Trans Am, Grand Am, and a whole bunch of other activities, is my brother Peter, and also somebody who's very, very special and has put up with all of my antics for 45 plus years, is my wife Barbara, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you all very, very much. I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Just a wee bit of housekeeping, a reminder that when the video starts, if the inductee and the presenters could go over and visit with Ralph Lucio, it would be appreciated. Our next inductee is Peter Lockhart.
Our next inductee is a veteran road racer at circuits across North America. He's gained a vast amount of experience on more than 40 race courses, from short sprint races to 12 and 24-hour endurance events. From his start in 1982, some of these events include the Formula Ford 1600 and 2000 Series, the Escort Endurance Series, the Players GM Series, Indy Lights, the Michelin Magna Enduro Series, and the Motorola Cup. Later in his career, he drove a Chevron Ford WSC at Daytona and Sebring and a Mustang Cobra SVT for Hall of Famers Multimatic Motorsports. Driving for Auto House Motorsports, he competed in several Speed World Challenge events, driving a Mercedes-Benz C230 in the touring car division. Aside from a large amount of competition, our inductee has also been successful on the business side of the sport, garnering successful sponsor partnerships with corporations like Esso, Sunoco, Sony, and Magna. He also negotiated an association with Dodge Motorsport and SRT for the Tommy Archer-driven Auto House Viper. He's also played a major role in the development of new racing talent, teaching and mentoring up-and-coming drivers such as Mark Wilkins and Kuno Whitmer. A great ambassador for our sport. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Peter Lockhart.
Is this on? Good, good. As my glasses go on, my age dictates. Thank you, Hugh. Good evening, members and directors of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame and honored guests, and congratulations to all the inductees here tonight. I'd like to start by thanking my old pal Rolf von Engelbrechten for nominating me, and to the nominating committee for selecting me. I'm deeply honored to be among this year's exceptional class of inductees, but I would not have achieved any of my racing success without the support of some very special people. I found my way into motorsport quite late in life, compared to today's household racing names who started their careers in go-karts before the age of 10. I grew up in Montreal with dreams of driving race cars. That got me to drive a tractor when I was 12. The next time I got to compete a little bit was I went drag racing with my dad's Buick Wildcat when he and my mother went to Europe. A couple of months later, he complained to me that the valves on this brand new Buick, 430 cubic inch, were something wrong, and the dealer and he couldn't figure it out. I let him in on what happened about 15 years later. It really wasn't until I relocated to Toronto in the late 1970s then, and I found my way to John Powell's Motorsport Racing School, that I finally got the bug. And John Powell saw to that. The next 20 years became a blur of different race cars, series, and tracks as I competed in sprint and long-distance endurance events all over North America. My heyday years in racing were the 80s and 90s, when I drove more than 20 different types of race cars, including open wheel, formula cars, closed wheel sedans, sports cars, and prototypes. And people would always ask me, what's your favorite race car? And I would always answer, next year's, because they always got better. In 1982, my good friend and restaurateur, Walter Oster, who is here with us tonight, stepped up and bought me the first of two Reynards, a Formula Ford and later a Formula 2000. And these were state-of-the-art cars that John Powell basically negotiated as the unfair advantage, and brought these cars in, and we did very well with them. I competed in a wide variety of series, as mentioned: Canadian Tire, Formula 2000, SCCA's Escort, World Challenge, Corvette Challenge, Players GM, Motorola Cup, IMSA Firehawk, Indy Lights, and all of David Berman's Canadian Enduro Series. In the end, I competed at over 45 tracks all over North America, all while wearing a suit and tie on Bay Street in my day job as a commercial real estate broker. And that was a bit of a juggling act for sure. All this was possible due to some very special people. My kids who are here tonight, Ryan, Alexis, and Michael, who grew up at the racetrack and loved going there, especially if Jason Priestley was racing. Remember that? Can we go? Jason's racing. And thanks to their mother, Karen, for bringing them along. Thanks to John Powell for training me and providing me with competitive cars, and for helping to create a number of the series where I had my most success. Again, to Walter Oster, special thanks, Walter, for providing me with top-notch equipment that allowed me to win on track and reap significant sponsorship deals. Without your support, I likely would not have had the long racing career that I did. And then thanks to my terrific sponsors who came along: Jim Duckworth of Bob Johnson Chevols, Peter Notzel and Gord Thompson, Esso Petroleum Canada, Marnix Van Gemmert and Bob McDonald of Sony Canada, and for Brad Brown, who hooked me up with Sunoco Canada, to Bill Packham and Scott Samuel at Middle and Walwyn, and Steve Codwell, who's in the house here tonight from Wasteco, the quiet guy behind Scott Goodyear's IndyCar success for sure. And to David Ford in Florida, who opened the door for us at Mercedes-Benz USA. Thanks also to Nick Morant, my partner at Lockhart Racing, and teammate Rolf von Engelbrechten, with whom we created some respect on track in the early 1990s for a boxy M5 BMW nicknamed the Fridge. We got that nickname removed after a few wins. Thanks to our terrific crew at Lockhart Racing: Marcus Glarner, Tom Tedder, Terry France, Scott Ellsworth, Linda Perkins, Randy Thurrow, Beach Auto, and others. In learning my racecraft, I came to understand that the secret of winning was very much tied to mental and physical preparation. Thanks to my trainer, Professor Ron Weiss, who's in the house, for beating me into shape. For me, a powerful motivator to do well was that I didn't want to let down the people and sponsors who backed me. One recurring thought during those years was how lucky I was to be at the pointy end of the grid in competitive cars, supported by great crews and sponsors, enjoying great results against excellent competitors in exciting and popular series. This is truly an honor to be inducted into the Hall alongside some real legends in Canadian racing. And in closing, thanks to those who had the foresight 25 years ago to create the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, to honor and recognize the efforts, achievements, and contributions that Canadians have made in the realm of Canadian motorsports, therefore allowing all of us to celebrate the sport we love. Thank you.
The first time I saw Peter Lockhart race was at Shannonville Motorsport Park in, I think, 1986. And it was for the Canadian Championship, the Formula Ford Series. And although Peter didn't win, he was the closest second place I think I've ever seen in my life. The late Bertrand Fabi beat him, but I'll tell you, it was without a doubt one of the most remarkable and incredible shows of skill and determination that I think I've ever seen. I'm proud today to call Peter a friend. Our next inductee is Dave Mathers.
Starting in the early 1960s from his home in southwestern Ontario, our next inductee has done it all, from working at tracks to race directorships, track promoter roles, to team ownership and sponsorship. And yes, he even did some racing himself. His focus has been on drag racing and oval track racing, including ownership and promotion of St. Thomas Dragway, and major roles in presenting and promoting events at other drag strips. He's also been involved at ovals like Delaware, Nilestown, and Flamborough Speedways with tech directing, announcing, and media duties. Our inductee also made his mark in motorsport circles with his organization and sponsorship of race teams. From 1986 to 1996, his Motion Motorsports race team recorded 20 championships with Hall of Famer Herbie Rogers and Paul Noakes in drag racing, Hall of Famer Gary Vasser in snowmobiles, Reuben McMurder in motorcycle racing, and oval track driver Steve Rodley, and Hall of Famers David Whitlock and Junior Hanley. Our inductee has played an instrumental role in Canadian motorsport with his significant contributions and has enhanced the sport on both Canadian and international levels. Please welcome to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Dave Mathers.
Wow, how cool is this? I didn't think we had movie cameras back in those days, but we did. 55 years ago, my connection to racing started. I was a tech guy at St. Thomas Dragway. 52 years ago, I met the girl I was going to marry, and I brought her down to St. Thomas Dragway and put her on the timing clocks. And this year we celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. That's my wife, Linda. In the summer of 1968, Bill Stuttlebauer, whose father owned Central Chev in London, approached me and said, "We're going to open a high-performance center in September. We want you to come and sell cars." I said, "Bill, I've never sold cars." He said, "You'll be fine." He said, "You know more about Chev engines and high performance than anybody I knew." I said, "Okay." Well, I found my niche in life. I loved it. 1969, I couldn't drag race a car because I was doing officiating at Windsor Dragway, St. Thomas Dragway, and Grand Bend Dragway. So I bought a stock car from Ron Perrin, Cole Perrin's father. You may have heard of Cole Perrin. He's the crew chief on the top NASCAR team, the 78 car that's winning all the races this year. In 1972, I'd given up racing because I broke my back on my snowmobile. And we decided the 5 racetracks in the area to have a thing called Speed Weeks. Mount Clemens, Delaware, Nilestown, Flamborough, and Cayuga. Tuesday night was the race at Nilestown Speedway. I was the announcer. I walked down into the pits. I looked over, and there's a 64 Chevelle sitting there that I'd never seen before, number 43 on the door. And what brought my attention to it was from the wheel well back, he had the fender cut off. And as I'm walking over, I think this guy's got to be pretty sharp, because that's what usually got folded underneath and cut a tire. So I walked over, I said, "How you doing? I'm Dave Mathers, the track announcer. What's your name?" He said, "My name's Junior Hanley." I said, "Wow." I said, "I've read about you in Dizzy Dean's Wheelspin News on a regular basis." I looked in his pickup truck. He had a Ford pickup with a topper, and inside was an air mattress and a bunch of bags and his tools. I said, "Where are you staying tonight?" He said, "Right there." I said, "No, you're not. You're coming home with us." That was the start of a friendship that lasted for years and years and years. When I was general manager at Northtown Ford, I got some Ford money and we sponsored Junior. And then, of course, when I bought the dealership in 1986, we became a racing team to be reckoned with. Junior Hanley was just amazing. He'd always been a Chevy guy, and he showed up with a Ford after I'd gotten him some money from Ford, and he raced Fords for quite a few years. We were so fortunate at Motion Lincoln Mercury. We had so many cars that we helped out. Herb Rogers is in the hall, the late Herb Rogers, Paul Noakes, Dave Whitlock, Steve Robley, Bill Rouse Sr., Bill Rouse Jr., and of course Junior Hanley. And we had a lot of different drivers drive our race cars. We had a fellow named Bill Elliott, who you might have heard of, ran an ASA race in one of our cars. We had another guy by the name of Don Biederman drove one of my cars. We almost had Ron Fellows in one of our cars, but unfortunately the motor in the main car blew up and my son Paul had to race, and he was in the points. He had to race the backup car. So Ron, I apologize for that 25 years later. And we had another guy by the name of Frank Hawley. In 1968, we needed a photographer at the drag strip. And we had a guy who used to come in the car club in London, and he worked on the railroad. And he was always taking pictures of the cars, the show cars, the race cars. I said, "How would you like to be track photographer at St. Thomas Dragway?" He said, "I will, but under one condition." I said, "What's that?" "Can I bring my young son?" I said, "How old is he?" He said, 13. I said, "Bring him." That was W&F Hawley Photography, Bill and Frank Hawley. Frank Hawley, we stopped at his driving school at Gainesville, and he said, "I've always wanted to drive a stock car." And I said, "I got one." He said, "Okay, I'll come up." We had Junior spent a little bit of time with him explaining things. Well, this was in 91, and Tom Curley was race director, and Frank hadn't quite grasped how to get around the ends. He was good on the straightaways, but he hadn't sorted it out yet, so I put him in the race as a promoter's option. In the first 10 laps of that race, we had no less than 3 caution flags, and every time the caution flag came out, Frank was about to be lapped. And Tom Curley, legendary ACT promoter, I always had Tom in this ear and Junior Hanley in this ear to talk to. Curley came on the radio and said, "Mathers, get your drag racer off my stock car track." So we pulled him off, put Paul in. Paul ended up in the top 10. Just luckily, he got in there. But anyway, I've had a tremendous career. Linda and I bought St. Thomas Dragway as something to do after we retired. First thing that happened, we got sued for $3 million for loss of enjoyment of property. So that only cost us $850,000 to get out of. Anyway, we had a great time at the drag strip, and I'm retired, and I've got the best job in the world. Thank you for this honor. I appreciate it.
Could I ask for the house lights to be brought up for just a moment? Because, thank you. 4 years ago, I wrote in my column in the Toronto Star Wheels section an advance for the Hall of Fame ceremony. And I said, if anyone buys a ticket as a result of reading this column, I will introduce you from the audience. And half a dozen people did, and I forgot to introduce them. And they approached me at the bar later, and it cost me about $50 worth of drinks to calm them down. But I said at the time that I would never make the same mistake again. Not that I would ever learn from my mistakes, because I put in the paper last Saturday, if anybody buys a ticket as a result of reading this column, I will introduce you from the audience. So it is my pleasure to recognize Don Churchill. Don, where are you? Thank you very much. Now, I want you to know, this man is no stranger to motorsport. He raced in the Bull of a Sedan series back in the day and was the pace car driver for all national and international events from 1984 to 2001 for the Canadian Racing Drivers Association and for Motorsport. So nice to see you here. And we have Rod Davis and his wife Linda. Where are you? Don't be shy now. There we go. Thank you very much. Now, the timing could not be more perfect, because Rod and Major General Lewis Mackenzie used to race Formula Fords together. And in fact, from what I understand, kind of got together on occasion. So welcome Rod and Linda. And our next inductee is Major General retired Lewis Mackenzie.
An active road racer since the mid-1970s, our next inductee has been instrumental in many driver safety campaigns and has tirelessly assisted many young drivers find the funds to go racing. Now a retired Major General in the Canadian Armed Forces, his military record is world-renowned. When the Bosnian War broke out in 1992, he created and assumed command of the peacekeeping forces Sector Sarajevo. His UN force opened the Sarajevo airport for the delivery of humanitarian aid. Using the media as a means of trying to help restore peace, he became an international celebrity. He's been a military media consultant, columnist, and the author of several books on military life. He was awarded the Order of Canada in 2006. His motto, grow old, not up, carried over to his racing. He was successful in Ontario GT3 midget racing and drove in the Esso ProTech Formula Ford Series. In 2007, he won the Diamond Class Ontario Championship for Formula Fords at the age of 67. He competed successfully in the Targa Rally Newfoundland and has been active in vintage racing. Not only has our inductee been an ambassador for Canada on the world stage, he's been an ambassador for our sport, helping younger drivers gain entry to achieve their dreams. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Lou Mackenzie.
Merci beaucoup, tous. 23 years ago, I stood on the Hall of Fame stage like this in another location, and due to a whole bunch of free publicity when I came back from Sarajevo and while I was there, I was asked to assist John Surtees in inducting the first cohort of individuals into the Hall of Fame. Had the great pleasure of inducting Peter Ryan, who had been killed in a Formula 2 race via his sister, who came to the ceremony. You might not realize it, but I owe more to motorsport probably than anybody in this room. I would not have joined the military if it hadn't been for motorsport. When I was going to university in Cape Breton, an annex of St. FX University, they had a thing called COTC. You went off for a summer, you got $230 a month, and you took 3 summers and you became a reserve officer for 5 years only. So a total of about 50 evenings. On my 3rd phase, we had an individual on our course in Camp Borden who had a PV 544. And he said, I'm going to Harewood Acres. Would you like to come along? I, like Peter Lockhart, dear friend, had driven tractors in Nova Scotia, and that was about the experience I had with 4 wheels. I went along with him,
100 meters from the circuit, 100 yards in those days, I smelled Castrol motor oil for the first time. I watched the race. Roger Penske won. A new friend, Ludwig Heimrath, was second. I went back in the fall, and Ludwig and Peter Ryan were paired up, and they won that race. I didn't have to look that up. I remember that. I went back to university. I quit university because I had to make some regular money so I could buy a sports car. I was totally obsessed. And I was a Protestant at a Catholic university studying philosophy, so it was the easiest course in the world. So what's the black Protestant think of St. Thomas Aquinas' narrative on this particular subject? And I can make anything up I wanted. I was representing the Protestant faith. So I was posted to Calgary. And in those days, our units were so big in the military, about 1,000 strong in an infantry battalion, that at least 10% of it were all jocks. And the jocks, it was much like the NHL or the NFL. Units would grab athletes from a particular unit and bring them into their unit for about 4 months to play a particular sport. And I was an all-round jock at the time. They didn't have athletic scholarships at St. FX in those days, but if you shoveled one sidewalk in the winter and mowed one lawn in the summer, you got free tuition, meals, and accommodation. And so I started being bounced around from unit to unit. I went from Victoria, went back to Germany, went from Germany, went for 2 years in the Gaza Strip, went from the Gaza Strip, came back to Victoria, went to Cyprus, came back went to Cyprus, came back to Calgary that time, got sent back to Vietnam or sent over to Vietnam, and then to Cairo with the Yom Kippur War for ceasefire negotiations. You'll notice not a hell of a lot of racetracks. But in 1975, I was now 35 years of age, and I was working for a major general that when he first met me said, "Lou, I want you to know I don't do weekends. I don't care if Stream Allied Commander Alex Haig, 4-star American, wants to see me. I don't work weekends." And with that in mind, I went to England, bought Lotus Elite 1, 2, 3, 4 Bristol body, driven by Jim Clark, not raced, but driven by Jim Clark for just over $1,600. And for $400, put a ZF transmission in it. Signed a contract with my wife that I would only race for one summer. This year we celebrated our 47th extension of the contract. There's an asterisk on it that says, "Thou shalt not embezzle from the family account." But I owe thanks to some folks here in the audience in addition to the hall. Nigel Mortimer, who was here with me when I raced Formula Fords against Nigel, and for the last 28 years he's been looking after me. I went from somewhere around mid-pack to fairly close to the front of the grid, all because of his guidance and his preparation of the car, not just the engine. To David White and his son Matt White, who is here with him, both Formula Ford champions in their own right, for nominating me. Matt and I were teammates for about 5 years. In Formula Ford, he would, at every track, I'd follow his line, his braking points, etc. In fact, I'd follow them twice, because when he'd lap me, I would follow him again. But all that to say that a real inspiration, my daughter Kim, who is here tonight, and who is a great horsewoman, only started when she was 5 at the French Riding Academy in Germany, and left horses 5 years ago and came to the dark side, and now races a Formula Mazda and keeps me honest, particularly in the wet. I have a great deal of thanks to all the Canadian and international soldiers that made me look good over the years. When I arrived back in New York, I got the debriefings at the UN, which are painful enough. It's still having problems coping with the world, but nevertheless, that's another story. I did a series of interviews that night. The last one was Larry King. And the last thing Larry asked me was, what are you going to do now? I said, I'm going back to Toronto to get my race car out of storage. I'm going to the Moosehead Grand Prix in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This sounded like a commercial. 20 minutes later, I had $20,000 of sponsorship. Harold McCain called me and said, what color is your car? I said, black. He said, I think McCain's Golden Fries would look really good on the side of that. I'd been begging Castrol Oil and getting it for about 10 years and thought that was a major contribution. So because soldiers made me look good, I've been blessed with sponsorship. And I really do thank the Hall for presumably starting a new category of really, really old farts that just really too thick to stop what they love. Thank you very much.
Our next inductee is Chris Pfaff.
Our next inductee has been one of the most influential contributors in sponsorship and support through a wide variety of road racing and karting disciplines. He spent his youth competing internationally in Champ Car Lights, the Motorola Cup, and the American Le Mans Series. In the 1980s, he took the reins of the family automotive business, expanding it to include many auto, truck, and motorcycle brands with close to 1,000 employees. And while the business prospered, he remained passionately involved in motorsport. His support and team ownership started in the 1980s and continues to this day. It included racing the Rothmans Porsche Series, the Firestone Firehawk Series, the UK-based Formula Palmer Audi Series, and the Honda Michelin Series. This involvement and leadership has led to the successful careers of many Canadian drivers, including Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famers Scott Goodyear and Richard Spinard, along with Robert Wickens and Kyle Marcelli. His involvement continued into the new century, fielding contenders in the Pirelli World Challenge with Audi and Porsche brands, along with a multi-car Porsche team in the Canadian-based Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Canada Series. Through the alliance with the Sunoco Ron Fellows Karting Championship, team driver Chris Green won the Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Canada Championship and the 2015 title with Ori Fidani. Followed up with the 2017 Porsche GT3 crown with Scott Hargrove at the wheel. Currently, he continues his support in the fostering of other drivers in his long-standing passion for racing and driver development. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Chris Pfaff.
So I had to bring up the three champions that I've won with here. So you'll remember from 1988, the Porsche Cup Series, Scott Goodyear, we won the championship together. And in 2015, Chris Green, we won the Porsche Cup Championship together. And in this year with Scott Hargrove, we won the Porsche Cup Championship together. And the timing for this award is so amazing. It's just been a great year for us. Last weekend, Chris Green won in Road Atlanta in the Continental with Jesse Lazar in a McLaren. So awesome for that. I just found out an hour ago that we won in Laguna in the with the Audi RS3 that you saw pictured up here, the C360 race team, a Canadian team with Paul Holton, who won the championship in that. So it's really been coming up great this year for Pfaff and Motorsport. People ask me, why why do you race? And I don't race, you know. I tried to race, and I asked Ron when he nominated me, is it for my driving? And he said, no, Chris, it's not for your driving. And John Powell may remember about 25 years ago, I had to get my license renewed for the Firehawk series. And John said, you know, Firehawk, the Jetta you're driving is not that fast. I know you drive all these high-performance cars. He says, you'll be okay, but you could lose 20 pounds, really, if you want the truth. So thanks for that, John. I remember that. So, you know, at Pfaff, we've used it for our dealerships into building our brand, and it's done so well for us for that. It also, our employees get motivated. We've developed some great partnerships, for example, with Castrol, and those things lead into all kinds of other things that we do. So it's an awesome experience for me. And finally to that, I just want to say thank you very much to all the guys that have been involved with Pfaff over the years. You know, the crew guys, the guys that clean the car, the guys that transport the car, they really do so much. They are so unsung. And I have to tell you, we've had some great people and some great chemistry in our team. Team manager Steve Bortolotti right now. All those guys have been great for us. So I want to thank them. My wife Carolyn for all her support and all the time away at it. And that's it. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the award and the honor. Thank you.
You have heard his name several times tonight. Our next inductee is John Powell.
Our next inductee has been a competitor and a motorsport builder, playing a major role in the development of not only significant racing series in Canada, but also the careers of several prominent drivers. Starting in the late 1960s with ice racing, this inductee then competed successfully in Formula B competition before he stopped racing himself to teach others. With the opening of the then Motorsport Racing School, he helped develop the talents of racers who went on to prominent careers, including Hall of Famers Scott Goodyear, Paul Tracy, Jeff Gordon, and Michael Andretti. With his knowledge of performance driving, he taught advanced techniques and driving skills to many in the engineering staff at General Motors. He also worked with the Canadian federal government to publish a driver training manual and produced films for the government of Ontario on the dangers of driving while under the influence. Along with teaching proper driving techniques, he was instrumental in the development of several Canadian road racing series, like Canadian Tire F2000, Players GM, and the Corvette Challenge. He also established teams in these series with drivers such as Hall of Famer Richard Spinard and Robin Buck. Many drivers, both professional and amateur, have benefited from his racing wisdom. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, John Powell.
Good evening. My congratulations to all the inductees tonight. Wow. And I saw Ron Fellows and Walter Oster. Thanks for buying Peter's stuff. He really needed it. And I want to thank Chelsea and Peter Lockhart for doing all the work to make it possible for me to be inducted into this Hall of Fame, but particularly to my son Devin and the whole Powell family for living through as much of my life as they could take. Seriously, life in motorsport for me has been one of focus and people, and to tell you the truth, my focus has always been so specific on the task that a lot of people thought that I was rude or objectionable, and I probably was. But many people come to me, and it happened this evening, said, hey, I took your school, and boy, I still remember those shifting lessons, and I ran into Rolf von Engelbrecht, and boy, his dad, Slim, was such an outstanding race driver. And his brother Arnold, who built those BMWs. I had a 320 and later a 320 converted into a 323, And Rolf tells me those cars still exist, they're still driving around, which is fantastic. I love cars. Sometimes my focus on racing probably blurred my interaction with people, and I must admit I'm terribly bad at remembering people's names. But I got to tell you, I was run over at Motorsport by Al Pease. I went to a hospital to be fixed up in 1966. I went to the same hospital that John Surtees was there for an accident, and Dr. Hugh Scully, who I thank for all the work he's done, will know that the orthopedic surgeon that looked after me and fixed me up because I had a broken femur was a guy called Dr. McGurry, who put a 18-inch long intermedullary cobalt molybdenum pin right down my thigh. It's still there. And I squat 205 pounds, and still today. So it's good. Thanks, Dr. Scully. I got into ice racing because my dad was no good at it. And Terry Dale will know that I had this great idea to have ice races on Dow's Lake, and we did that for a few years until the National Capital Commission came to me and said, that was a great idea, Powell, but we want to do the world's longest ice race rink, so the cars have to go. Ice skating rink, I beg your pardon. I got into ice racing, and I actually won an award that even Ron Fellows didn't get. I got a trophy from Princess Grace of Monaco. 1968, gentlemen. Can you imagine this? The Princess Grace was there. I beat Craig Fisher in a Penske car with my little Mini. I got long hair, a cape, and I'm with Princess Grace, and they called it Beauty and the Beast. My race career went downhill from that point. I want to thank people like John Spencer Nairn. I don't know that many of you know that guy from Montreal, but he pointed out to me that racing on bad tires was bad. The Renton family and Manatic Motors, who gave me a job as a mechanic's apprentice. Dave Fancott was the parts manager there. He lent me his MGB and I wrecked it. Terry Dale worked there and he never lent me his car. I went to Montreal. I worked with Bob Barrell, Peter and Wendy Keith. They gave me a job there. They were fun times, but those were simpler times. I got to tell you, Bob Barrell wanted to test an AC Kroger. He took it out onto the 20 and went 120 miles an hour. Came back and said, the Dion, it's a little bit loose, tighten it up. I don't know what they'd do these days. Back in Montreal at that time, I hung out with Pierre-Luc Lafreniere. That's another person that maybe some of you don't know, but he wrote one of the first books on Canadian motorsport. Gilles Bossier from Montreal Matin helped me a lot with my racing career. I hadn't even got to Motorsport yet to do the school, and I was racing. I won a race at Three Rivers, Quebec, in a Formula B, and I'm still there in the lights. Can you imagine? All those heroes like Gilles Villeneuve, James Hunt after me. Wow. In 1971, Jacques Couture gave me a job, his first instructor. Jacques was a hands-on guy. He taught me a lot, but he broke his leg or something, or his arm, hang gliding. He needed an instructor. You were it. So I did that. I raced Formula B. And I'm going to tell you a story that nobody knows. I finished second to Bill Brack that year, in 1973. I really resented finishing second to Bill. He deserved the win. But let me tell you, the penultimate race in Debert, Nova Scotia, I got T-boned by Boodle Roos. Car went on its roof. It's a single-seater. I'm trapped in it. Some spectators lifted it off. Car was a mess. Somehow got back to Montreal. And my sponsor was Fleet Truck Bodies. And there was a truck driver there, Michel, who said, you got to go to the last race. You can keep the lead in the championship and beat Bill Brack. This guy, Michel, had little money, didn't speak English, could not read or write. He sold his motorbike, bought me a ticket to Winnipeg for the last race, and drove my truck out matching the map numbers with the street signs because he couldn't read. I told you my focus was on racing, but it's the people that made it happen. And Michelle was just one of those people, one of those cogs in that motorsport life that I've had such a good time with. When Harvey Hudis wanted me to go work at Motorsport, he said, you got to quit racing, and that was tough. But think about how the school did so well. Chris Pfaff mentioned that he did some work with me. Scott Goodyear, they claim I trained him, and it's true. I trained Jeff Gordon, and I trained Cara Hendricks, and Tom Sneaver, and Rick Mears, and Michael Andretti. But I don't remember Scott. I don't think Scott needed my help. He was such a great racer. Bob Hanna, Roger Peart, Paul Cook, all those guys helped me as I was doing things. And I can't say enough about Harvey Hudis, who taught me so much stuff. Not a lot of it took. I remember him saying to Devin and Chelsea's mother, you've got to train John better because he doesn't keep the money in his hands for long. Still doesn't. Carl Haas was also very good to me when I took over the school, but he made or sold cars made by Eric Broadley that weren't very good. And tip of the hat to Alec Purdy, Brian Stewart, Danny Burrett. These were the guys. Alec Purdy was a brilliant race car designer. He redesigned the front suspension of one of those little Lola race cars and made it work. I've only got 4 minutes, isn't that right, Sid? I got a Peter Lockhart story for you that set up a whole bunch of things. Peter Lockhart is a very accomplished racer, but we were hanging around, and he said, John, you got to come up to Lachute, we're having a big party. So I borrowed a 1984 Corvette from General Motors of Canada and drove up to Lachute. Somehow, the rear brakes broke. It was probably because I was doing handbrake turns at 60 miles an hour. But I had to jury-rig the calipers, put a socket in, jam the piston so it wouldn't come out, hang it off the trailing arms, and drive the car back to Oshawa with just front brakes. And I was really worried that Nick Hall and PR would be mad. But they took the parts off, sent them to Dave McClellan, the chief engineer of Corvette, and a few weeks later the phone rang and said, John, you broke our car, and we had it at the proving grounds for 2 years, and nobody broke it like that. Can you come work for us? You see, if Terry had lent me his car, I'd be working for him. I'm sure people wondered how I managed to sell GM on the Camaro series and the Corvette Challenge and all that good stuff. And now you know, the only reason I was able to do it was because I was working for GM because I broke things, and it was easy to get things into motion. But all these people, again, the people were the cogs in the wheel that made it happen. Marty Shenhall, what a guy. Dickinson from GM of Canada, an engineer. Bill Ball, do you remember Bill Ball? What a great guy. That they made it work. And sure, I created the Corvette Challenge, and we offered $1 million in prize money, and that was pretty cool. But think of the people that raced in it. Paul Tracy, Jimmy Vassar, John Manuel Fangio II, Olympian Bruce Jenner. Think about that. Lou Gelati, another great guy. Peter Lockhart, who is deservedly a Hall of Fame guy in here now, he was a very able single-seater, but he excelled in Corvettes. Let me give you a real Peter Lockhart story. He put the Corvette Challenge car, as I recall, in 1989 on the pole at the Toronto Motion Indy. And then he wrecked the car. We didn't have a car for him. I had to stand back. But I did have a guy racing in the series called John Greenwood, who was known for producing C3 Corvette body kits. And he was always complaining about his Corvette was no damn good. All those cars were equal. And this was a race series for drivers. We went to great lengths with all sorts of black boxes to make them equal. So I said to Greenwood, I said, give Peter Lockhart your car, and it'll do better than you're doing, and when you get it back, it'll be better than before. So we got the car Saturday. Paul Thiessen from Elliott Lake was Peter Lockhart's technician, a brilliant guy. Paul put the car right. Peter won the race in a car that previously was a backmarker. That's my Peter Lockhart story. You know, Roger Penske told me that Superman can't win in a bad car, and I'm reminded that while we tried to produce good cars, again, it was the people and the engineers that made it happen, and for my school, the hundreds and even thousands of people that I trained since 1971. So I got to say that I had a good time. I was blessed to be able to work with karting. Harvey Hudis let me build a go-kart track. We had our first CIK race of Motorsport. Danica Patrick was there. But I'll top that. Nico Rosberg was there. And when he crashed out, he thumped the ground and had a big fit. You know what? He grew up. And props to Nico, he won the World Championship and he quit. Good for him. I think retiring at the top of your game is the way to do it, and sooner or later, you all grow up. Cole Pern was mentioned here. He used to go-kart. His mom worked in OKRA doing registration for go-karting. These were the people that made that karting association work, and it's Paul Cook and Roger Peart who grew it up and gave it what it is today, a much safer place to be. Not long ago, Cole Pern was that big, racing in a little go-kart. Look at him today. I think they're going to win that Monster Energy Cup. So I have to say, we had a race team staffed by great people, a school passed by great people. My son, I'm blessed, he won the Grand Am Championship in 2001 in November, a month before his granddad, my dad, passed away. Dorothea, my mother, crewed for Ted back in the day, and she lived with me in the last 10 years of her life. Passed away last year, just short of 101. I'm not living that long. I'm still fixing cars and parts. I thank Peter Lockhart and my daughter Chelsea for their diligence in promoting this great honor for me, but please understand that for me it really is a reflection on the greatness of all the people who helped me as I focused on various things in motorsport. Thank you.
Our next inductee is Sid Priddle.
Our next inductee's contributions to Canadian motorsport didn't come from the seat of a race car. They came from behind a typewriter and later a computer, from a telephone pitching stories, and the strong, long-lasting personal relationships he built with Canada's leading sports media and journalists while promoting racing across the country. As a 22-year-old Cubs sports reporter at the Old Montreal Star, where he faced basic indifference to racing, he wrote a front-page story on Sterling Moss's 1961 Players 200 win at Motorsport. Sterling liked the story a lot. He called his friend the owner of the Star, and this led to a full-time racing beat, providing groundbreaking Canadian coverage in frontline media. Until the Molson Indy arrived in Toronto in 1986, the largest annual sporting event in Canada was the CFL's Grey Cup. But through our inductees' public relations, media, and marketing efforts with the Toronto Indy that eventually expanded to Vancouver, the sports landscape changed, and both races were counted among the nation's largest events, sports or otherwise, for several years. He headed up the communications effort on behalf of the title sponsor at more than 14 F1 Canadian Grands Prix, 10 IndyCar Molson Indy Toronto events, 10 Molson Indy Vancouver events, and 5 Edmonton Indies. His public relations campaigns with countless drivers culminated with at least 15 being inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, including Gilles Villeneuve, Bill Brack, Mario and Michael Andretti, the late Greg Moore, and Paul Tracy. In addition to his PR and media relations success, he also had overall responsibility for marketing events, putting bums in seats, as they say. Both IndyCar races under his guidance enjoyed massive record crowds, averaging well in excess of 150,000 per weekend, near the top in attendance for all IndyCar events on their schedule. This inductee also contributed significantly to the Cross Canada Shell 4000 Rally, the inaugural 1967 F1 Canadian Grand Prix, and the unique Telegram Trophy race at Motorsport. Perhaps his proudest achievement, head of public relations and media for the first Phoenix-based Formula One U.S. Grand Prix in the late 1980s, the only Canadian to ever do so. F1 chief Bernie Ecclestone called him from his helicopter with a simple three-word message: "Well done, Sid." And we concur. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Sid Priddle.
Thank you, Deanne, Jerry, and Stuart. I don't know where to get those photos, but I had hair. For those of you who know me, may be wondering about the shirt and tie as opposed to my usual turtleneck. Well, I only got dressed up like this because I thought there would be red carpet interviews on the way in, and somebody would ask me, "Who are you wearing?" This is new for me, being on stage instead of out there, hoping the speakers will stick to their allotted times. Certainly, I will try my best so you can all get to the bar sooner. Mr. Chairman, honorable inductees, past and present, ladies and gentlemen, and a special hello to my sister Karen and her husband Sean, all the way from Wisconsin, home of the great Green Bay Packers. Just thought I would slip that in. But they promised when I started speaking they wouldn't take a knee. Oh. I often wonder how many believe in the phrase being in the right place at the right time. And I certainly do. Otherwise, I would not be standing here this evening. Although let me make something clear. Everything I worked on involved a family member, whether it be one of our children or my partner for 59 years, Betty, who organized most Indy festival events and players pit stop demos on public streets in Vancouver and Toronto. Allow me for a moment to take you back to the day in the early spring of 1959. I was a very young sports reporter, happily covering some stick and ball sports. Red Fisher, my boss and mentor, called me into his office and broke this news. "Sid, we've been advised that we no longer may use freelancers to cover auto racing. And since you are the low man on the totem pole, Motorsport is now your beat." To which I replied, "No way. I don't know anything about cars. I can't even drive a car." When I say I knew nothing about cars, I mean I thought there was such a thing as turn signal fluid. That didn't work. As Red promptly pointed out, all staff photographers have cars, and you can go with one of them. What a dilemma. The late and great Len Coates, who I think was baptized in motor oil, once wrote, "Sid Priddle didn't know the difference between a turnip and a wrench when his son said, 'Let's go go-kart racing.'" As I moved forward to research and learn more, it was frustrating. I mean, what is a toe heel? New tap dance, perhaps, that Betty was learning? A four-wheel drift? I thought that was something I hit in the Montreal snowbank. As time went on and I met more people in motorsport, I was intrigued by their dedication and the fact that these people really were athletes. I had help from many people, including past inductee Ross de St. Croix, who was the first person I ever met at a race. Motorsport became a way of life, progressing from journalism to the world of PR, and just in racing, but some automotive manufacturers as well. That's when I learned that a block heater was not the neighborhood hooker. So much to learn about upshifting, downshifting, the apex, the technique of drafting, which I thought was beer, but anyway. But it was rewarding to make a living in this newfound world, many new friends, visiting great places, and working with super people. I was surrounded and supported by huge talent, far too many to mention. But I must point out an individual who is here this evening all the way from Montreal, Nicole LaSalle. Nicole's out there somewhere. There she is, right back there. Yeah. Yeah. A great writer who understood the world of news and what had to be employed to get publicity. I've been blessed to have the opportunity to work on events with family members, including the Grand Prix of Barrie go-kart race to the streets of Barrie. An artistic success, but we won't discuss the financial side. It is not often one can work in a field they enjoy, but that's where my trail led, thanks in part to being in the right place at the right time. And now I'm honored to be in this place, standing before you on a special moment in my life for which I'm very grateful. And today, I do know the difference between a wrench and a turnip. I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Our last inductee, this time in the international category, is Legendary Motor Car.
Located in Halton Hills, Ontario, is one of North America's premier collector car dealerships, specializing in the buying, restoring, and selling of rare classic, muscle, and vintage sports cars. Each area of their restoration shop is staffed by skilled tradesmen and artisans. As a budding teenage mechanic, Peter Kloot realized there was a business opportunity to be made in the classic car business. Slowly, his operation became an industry leader in massing one of the finest collections of rare and exotic automobiles. Kloot is an avid NASCAR Pinty Series racer who on occasion road tests some of his inventory on track. His sons Ryan and Gary are also competitive NASCAR racers, with Gary winning Rookie of the Year honors in 2015. Both boys are active in the day-to-day operation of the family business. Housing this rare collection of performance machinery is a 55,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility with a 100-car showroom which is open to the public. Peter Kloot's vision has become an internationally renowned venture built around his love for cars. Whether it's securing a rare one-off vehicle for a client or the complete restoration of a classic muscle car, Legendary Motor Car and the Kloot family are at the forefront of the cool car culture. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame this year's international inductee, Legendary Motor Car.
"32 years ago, I was getting married, I was finishing school, and I convinced my wife, Vicki, that we could make a living buying and selling and restoring cars, and she bought in. Lucky me. The next 5 years were basically idiot-proof. The market went from 0 to 100. It was the first big surge in collector cars, and things were really good. We moved out to Milton, and things went off the rails a little with the recession. But then 24 years ago or 25 years ago, I'd never been to a racetrack, but the Shelby Convention was held at Watkins Glen. And it was life-changing, and it was also changing for our business. And Paul Cook doesn't know this. I don't know where he is. But a customer of mine was racing a 66 Shelby. We were showing a car, and it happened to be the Comstock car. He took me for a couple laps in the car around the track, and I was hooked. I came back, and I talked to that customer, and he says, you know, they have to be original cars. So I went out to the showroom. There was a 66 Hertz car in the showroom. Their slogan used to be, you know, rent a racer. Well, I took that car out of the showroom, I gutted it, put a roll cage in it, and started racing. And a couple years later, I sold that car for a profit, and I thought, man, this motorsport business is going to be great. You can race cars, you can have a ton of fun, and you can make money doing it. And we started doing the research on great sports cars, and we learned that you could take them, restore them, and make money. In 92, Gary was born. In 94, Ryan was born. And the first thing we did is we took them out to the shop, and the shop was right behind the house. And they basically grew up in the shop, as you can see by the photos. And we built cars together and karted together, and it was really good. One of the best days I've ever had in motorsport was when both Gary and Ryan won the Canadian Nationals that same year, one in junior, one in senior, and guess who was there? Paul Cook was there again. So life progressed, and it really became a family business, and it became an international business. We sell all over the world now, and it's more than just cars. It's about history, experiencing history, and we get to race at all sorts of great tracks around the world and race great cars. But it's not just a family business either. There's 20 guys back at the shop that are as passionate as I am, and my kids and my wife, about the business. And it's a real honor to have Legendary Motor Car inducted for something we all love doing. Thank you.
I remember that day at Goodwood when Gary and Ryan both won national championships, and their big reward was they wanted Mom and Dad to take them to McDonald's. My kids didn't have to worry about that. They ate at McDonald's all the time. This concludes the formal portion of the evening. If the inductees will come up on the stage after we finish here for a group photograph. And a big thank you, by the way, to photographer Ryan DuPont. If they could come up for a group picture, that'd be appreciated. I think I introduced everybody that I promised to. I did a quick count while Peter Clute was talking there between Dr. Scully and I think we introduced everybody here tonight. Do we miss anybody? It's okay, I'm dying up here, folks. I have to remind you of the silent auction, which goes till 10 o'clock. Big thanks to Michael Taylor. There's a cash bar, snacks are available, and the rest of it. And to formally conclude this evening's festivities, please welcome back to the stage Dr. Hugh Scully.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've all enjoyed an evening where we've seen many aspects of motorsport in Canada, both in Canada and internationally, with recognition of people that have made a tremendous contribution. Just as the evening concludes and we move to interact socially, let me thank all of the inductees and their supporters for being here, and a particular thanks, Norris, to the job that you've done. Ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned. Thank you.